The river that never runs dry. My name's Will Thompson, and I've lived my whole life in a small village called Riverbend, tucked away along the bayou in Louisiana. The people here are simple folk, hard-working, with weathered hands, and a deep respect for the land and the water that have provided for us through generations. One evening in the late fall, I found myself lost. I had gone out to see a cousin who lived in the next parish, but the thick fog rolled in quicker than I had expected, and before I knew it, I was driving down unfamiliar roads, the headlights of my old truck barely cutting through the mist. The map was no help, and the road signs had long since faded into disrepair. The road I was on, a dirt path barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass, twisted through dense pine trees. I pulled over to the side and sat in my truck, listening to the quiet. I had no signal on my phone, and the only sound was the occasional call of a crow in the distance. I remember thinking, if I could just get out of this fog, I'd be fine. I was about to turn around when I saw a light flickering in the distance, small but steady. It was a lantern, glowing softly in the dark. I thought about it for a moment, then decided to head toward it. I figured if anyone lived out this far, they'd know how to get me back on track. It wasn't long before I saw a weathered shack, with a porch light casting a yellow glow against the dark. The house looked ancient, but there was something welcoming about it. As I walked up the wooden steps, the door creaked open, and an old man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and thin, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a plaid shirt tucked into suspenders. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes were sharp. "Lost your way, son?" he asked, his voice slow but warm. "Yes, sir," I said. "I'm trying to get back to Riverbend, but this fog's got me all turned around." "Well, you're in luck," he said with a small smile. "Come on in. I'll give you some supper and we'll talk." I followed him inside, and the smell of cooking filled the air. A mixture of gumbo, smoked sausage, and something I couldn't quite place. The man, who introduced himself as Elijah Carter, had a small stove in the corner where a pot bubbled away, steam rising from the lid. His house was humble, but it had the warmth of someone who knew how to make a home out of the simplest of things. "You're not from around here, are you?" Elijah asked as he set a bowl of steaming gumbo in front of me. "No, sir. I'm from Riverbend. Just visiting family, but I got turned around." "You came a long way. Riverbend's a piece up the road. But out here, we don't have much for roads anymore. Just the ones that time hasn't washed away," Elijah said, settling into his chair across from me. He looked out the window as though speaking to himself. "Folks don't come out this way much anymore." I nodded, understanding. Most of the young people in our village had moved to the city, chasing the promise of work and a better life. The old ways were fading. Elijah stirred his gumbo with a wooden spoon, his hands steady despite their age. "You ever seen the river out there, Will?" he asked suddenly, his eyes fixing on mine. I paused, not sure where he was going with this, but I nodded. "I've seen it a few times, sure. It's right near the village, but not much of it's ever been anything to talk about. Just part of the landscape." Elijah leaned back in his chair, and his gaze grew distant, as though he was seeing something that wasn't there anymore. "You see, that river's got a story," he said slowly. "One that's been passed down through the years, but it's not something many people remember anymore." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of story?" "The story of the river that never runs dry," Elijah said, his voice lowering as if he were sharing a secret. "See, that river's been here long before you or me, or any of our kin. It's the lifeblood of this land, and it's been the same for as long as folks have lived around here. Some say it has a way of giving back to those who respect it. I looked out the window, trying to understand what he meant. The rain had started to fall, tapping gently against the wooden porch. I could barely see the river from where I sat, but I knew it wound through the village, a silent, steady force. Elijah continued, his voice growing more intense. Years ago, my grandfather told me something about the river. He said it never ran dry, not even in the worst droughts, not even when the land was parched and the crops were dying. The river would always find a way to keep flowing. That's why we live here. The land, the water, they give you what you need, but they demand respect. I could tell Elijah was lost in his memories, and I didn't want to interrupt him. He went on, recounting how his family had lived on the land for generations, how the river had seen them through good times and bad. There had been floods, of course, and storms that washed away homes and fields. But the river had always provided in some way, whether it was in the form of fish, water for crops, or just the comfort of knowing it was there, steady and unyielding. You think that's true, Elijah? I asked quietly. That the river's more than just water? That it's got something deeper, something that gives back to you? He looked at me, his eyes bright despite his age. I do. You respect the land, and it respects you. Maybe it's not always about what you expect, but it's there if you're willing to listen. As the night wore on, I sat in silence, the storm outside making the world feel smaller, as if the house and the land around it were all that mattered. Eventually, I told Elijah that I needed to head out before it got too late. I'll get you back to the main road in the morning, Will.